Hello again, everybody. This week we wrap up our specific look at Eastern religions, and we'll try to tackle four of them in some sort of comprehensive fashion: Daoism, Confucianism, Shinto, and Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism isn't technically Eastern, I guess. I mean, doesn't we don't really tend to lump that one in with Buddhism and Hinduism and the like, more Middle Eastern. But for argument's sake, this is our kind of a wrap up at the major religions of the Eastern world. And in this presentation, we were going to take a look at Daoism and Confucianism, two religions, or some would say not religions but philosophies, that are deeply embedded into the history and culture of China. So let's get into it. So I start with we're going to look at a couple of paintings that of common themes that show up in a lot of Chinese religious art. This one is often referred to as the three teachings of China, or the three teachings of China in harmony with one another. And it shows kind of three generations. You have Lao Tzu, who is the again the quote-unquote founder, I guess you'd say, of Taoism, as the old man. And then the middle-aged man, Confucius, over here, and the baby is Buddha. And so what the painting seeks to convey is how all three of these religions really belong, literally in the painting, to the same family. And we'll quickly see there's lots of overlap between them. And I'll do my best to try to sort out, what are the significant differences between these religions. But they are deeply related to one another. And Chinese history and culture, back to antiquity, has long recognized that there is a clear overlap between all of these. There's another painting called the Vinegar Tasters, which is used not so much to kind of show the three religions, or the three founders of these religions in harmony, but to draw out kind of subtle distinctions between them. And this is a painting that's often used to, in some ways, I promote is maybe that's not the right word, but to kind of come down on the side of Taoism in some ways. And the painting shows, it kind of tells the story, is that you have Confucius, you have Buddha, and you have Lao Tzu, the three teachings of China, all standing around a vat of vinegar. And the story goes that each of them dips their finger into the vinegar, and they taste it. And they all have a very distinct reaction to the vinegar. And the story is that that the way they react to the taste kind of gives you a sense of the essence of the philosophy of the religion of each of those. And I think it's really quite useful to kind of boil these things down to a kind of parable. It makes it very easy to remember. So how does this work? Well, I found that this cartoon, which framed it in terms of not necessarily the three guys dipping their fingers into a vinegar jar, but a barrel of pickles, which is similar kind of like a sour taste. And so we get the reactions of each of them. So Confucius says, "The vinegar is sour. We must teach the correct recipe in order to make proper pickles." So for Confucius, and we'll see this in this presentation, getting the rules right, getting the structure right, in this case, getting the recipe right, then everything else follows from that. Once you get the structure right, everything else in society and culture will follow. The Buddha says the vinegar is bitter. Only by not desiring a pickle can one eliminate the bitterness. So that focus on controlling one's desire, getting rid of desires, is a way to achieve harmony. So don't desire. Learn not to desire the pickle, and you don't have to deal with the bitterness. And then Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, says it's all good. Sure, the vinegar is both sour and bitter, but this is the way nature intends pickles to taste. And so Taoism rests on the principle of look to nature for your kind of core principles for truth. Things are as they have to be, and so don't mess with the recipe, don't not desire the pickle, but just accept the pickle's taste for what it is. That's what nature intends, and so therefore it's inherently harmonious. So come back to this. I think it's a great way to kind of consider the subtle differences between these three major Asian, Eastern, Chinese religions. All right, but we're talking about Taoism first. So a quick summary. Its founder, Lao Tzu. We'll see that at best we can call him maybe quasi-historical, but he is this kind of wise guru in the mountains type of figure, from whom by tradition becomes the core teachings of Taoism. Is it a philosophy or a religion? I think, like with Buddhism, I think many people would say, well, Taoism doesn't have a lot to talk about in terms of like specific gods or goddesses. I mean, it certainly deals with the transcendent and the divine, but for many people, I think probably from a Western point of view, it would come down much more as a more kind of life philosophy than a religion. But I'll leave that to you. Tao itself, or Tao, means simply the way, the path. Its beliefs, natural and harmony and balance is found in nature. Nature will tell you everything that you need to know about the state of your own soul and where your own soul should be. Desires corrupt, very, just like in Buddhism. Striving, ambition leads to conflict. One should simply be. Look to nature. The trees and the birds don't strive and clamor for reputation, and neither should you. You are a part of nature. Seek your harmony within it. So the goal is to seek balance in all things. The yin-yang symbol, which I'm sure most of you have seen, we'll look at it here, demonstrates that. Black and white, hot and cold, dry and wet, male and female. Find a balance in all things. Live in the present, be here now, very Buddhist as well. Live according to nature. Find inner peace. So where's the starting point for the Taoist? It's inside. And if you can find inner peace, balance within yourself, and then that will ripple out. And then your self-centered, self-balancing will lead to balance in the household, balance in the neighborhood, balance in the city, balance in the country, and it ripples out from there. Its sacred text, the Tao Te Ching, the way of virtue or the way of the Tao, the book of the virtue of the Tao, something like that, which is credited to the original teachings of Lao Tzu. Are there gods? Kind of, not really. You don't find a pantheon of deities in Taoism. Certainly these practices can be applied and were applied to different religious systems. I mean, that's why some people would call it, say, a philosophy, is that these are teachings that you can apply to lots of different, dharma, religious practices. And so therefore, it doesn't really rest on a distinct belief in distinct gods. Lots of these kind of famous little pithy phrases are associated or credited to Lao Tzu. I just kind of did an internet scan. I don't know how legit some of these are, but it's such as kind of how Taoism has been handed down over the centuries. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Again, don't focus on the huge picture. Be here now. Focus on just the step that you're taking. Just live in the moment. If you want to become full, let yourself be empty. Lots of these kinds of seemingly paradoxical teachings. So rid yourself of desires, rid yourself of striving, and that's how you truly become full. So many of these Eastern teachings are pushback against kind of the material world. I think they really speak quite a powerful critique to kind of the Western world, which is very materialistic, the promises of advertising and capitalism say that, if you accumulate stuff, if you accumulate money, that's the path to security and happiness. And these philosophies say that's all an illusion. You're just pursuing needless desires, which inherently corrupt. An unbending tree is easily broken. And so again, be a bending tree. Go, the wind blows the pliant willow, and it goes this way, and when the wind is done, it bends right back. And so again, go with the flow. How you respond to things is so key. How you respond to suffering, and how you get back up again is key in Taoist thought. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. So slow but gradual, but ultimately powerful change. And I know a Taoist picture or metaphor is, if you think of a drip on a stone, and that drip just hits the stone in the same place for hundreds of years, it will hollow out that stone or produce kind of a hole through the stone. And so it's powerful change, but it's gradual. And so that too, I think, is a word of challenge to kind of the fast-paced, hurried life of the Western kind of logical world, we might call it. All right, so just like with all of these religions that go back to antiquity, it's hard to pin down specific historical things. Taoist thought goes back hundreds, if not thousands of years. There is this principal prophet Lao Tzu, who again, we can't really say if he's historical or not, but his founding principles, these teachings, wherever they came from, are written down in the Tao Te Ching and start to circulate around 550 BC, which is the same time that the teachings of Confucius, the teachings of Buddha, we're actually very close to the teachings of Socrates, way over in the Greek world, and Plato. There's something happening in the world at this time period that's remarkable. Taoism boasts about 20 to 30 million adherents worldwide, mostly in Asia. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge number. I would say this undershoots it because it's hard to count these kinds of things. But you'll find Taoism and the Taoist principles, even if people don't call them Taoist principles, around the world. They find their way into lots of different philosophies and religious practices. So here we're back to kind of our religions of the world map. And you can see the purple here, which roughly kind of overlaps the nation of China as of today in the Korean peninsula. And there you find your Buddhism, Daoism, Confucianism, the dominant force. Again, China today is a communist nation, and so technically religion is illegal. But these things go deeply embedded into their culture, and you don't simply eradicate them by changing the political structure. All right, Lao Tzu. So like I said, we don't know if he's really historical. I mean, the name itself just simply means something like wise old man, wise old philosopher, which seems to speak as to kind of an archetype more than a historical persona. His biographies, such as they are, say that he lived at the same time as Confucius. He had a high level position in the city, but he rejects the city. It says you can't find balance in the city, and so he goes off into the mythical Kunlun Mountains, and to live the life of a guru. And the kind of tradition says that he didn't see himself as a teacher, starting a religion. It was more accidental. There was a border guard that apparently came across him, so the story goes, and sat at his feet, learned his teachings, and ultimately compiled them, wrote them down into what we call the Tao Te Ching, the classic of the way and virtue. So even though we can't kind of pin the origins of the Taoism to a kind of a strict historical period, it's thought that Daoism and Confucianism too arrived at a time of political chaos, lots of wars, lots of fighting, lots of instability. And so in the Tao Te Ching, there's lots of advice, lots of wisdom on how do you live during such chaotic times. And out of the Tao Te Ching, you get this idea that Taoism says that governments are naturally suspect. They're kind of a function of the city. They're a construct. That's what I'm trying to say. And they're a kind of a human, artificial type of organization. It's in nature, which is natural, is where you look to find truth and beauty. And so how do you respond to political chaos? You simplify your life, you reduce your desires, you look to nature, you try to find your place within nature as close as you can, and achieve a kind of spontaneous ease. So you kind of live a life of harmony and virtue in a way that you don't really have to work at it anymore. It's just simply natural. It just kind of spills out of your soul, as it were. And there is kind of this you'll see this in Confucianism too, kind of this idea of concentric circles. That there's kind of this ultimate Tao that's out there. It kind of reminds me of like Atman in Hinduism. There is kind of an ultimate divine reality that human beings can't really see or describe or feel. But by pursuing balance through nature and find yourself within nature, you can mimic that harmony that's out there in this greater sense. And so here's a famous saying from the Tao Te Ching. So man models himself on earth. He looked to nature for harmony. Earth itself models itself on the balance and harmony of heaven, and heaven on the way. That should really be capitalized here. And the way on which that is naturally so. So there's some kind of ultimate way, ultimate Tao, that kind of filters down in concentric circles down to human beings. So you model your soul on nature, which imitates heaven, which imitates the Tao, and you can find some kind of transcendent harmony there. So yes, you have the way of heaven, the Tao of heaven, ultimate reality, essentially unknowable. God, they don't speak of God because God would be undefinable. There's just simply the Tao. There's the way of nature. This is what you can see. in the forest, in the mountains. Lao Tzu goes to the mountains to find harmony. Finding yourself and understanding yourself within the cycles of all life. And the way of the human, sometimes referred to as the doable Tao, includes guidelines for man's ability to go through life. Only where all is clean will it reveal itself. One must put aside all emotions and desires in order to perceive the true way. And that strikes us as very Buddhist. Another overlap. So how do you live? So Taoist, you'll sometimes in Taoist texts you'll find this call for an abandonment of morality. So again, this idea that human morality is a construct. It's at root, while it may be helpful and useful to some degree, it's also at root artificial. And so there's no such thing as kind of a top-down morality from king, governor, God, father, mother. You have to pursue it in a different kind of way. And so since the Tao is ultimately without desires, the idea is that if humans model themselves after the Tao, achieve that inner harmony, order will naturally flow. There won't be a need for rules and laws and artificial structures because everything will be according to nature and everything will be harmonious, simply as it should be. So the yin-yang symbol is kind of the circle with the dots, the black and white, is as close as we get to is kind of a principal symbol of Taoism. Again, the white and the dark, this idea that all things are in harmony, even good and evil are at different ends of the same pole, and so you don't tend to see a kind of this dichotomy between, seek the good and shun the evil. It's this idea that in some ways you need both of those for clarity, for balance. And so to think of this yin-yang symbol, you don't want to be all in the white, you don't want to be all in the dark, and the dots reveal that there's ultimately kind of no such thing as kind of pure white and pure black, or pure light and pure darkness. There's always going to be kind of a splotch of the other side within them. But the idea is to be kind of near the still point. Think of this as a wheel. Where is there the least amount of motion and disturbance in a wheel? It's at that center. You don't want to be on the edge. You don't want to be the outside. That would be, a way off to one side or the other. So you want to find counterbalance. You want to find a middle point, a harmony in the storm, as it were. So, Taoist teaching would say it's not worthwhile to, get upset at life circumstances, good or bad. You want to find this kind of stoic medium in all things. This idea of this, everything that happens must happen. So don't, kick and scream and cry and shout about how things are unfair. Choose a different response to these kinds of things. So I have this nice little parable, I think, which illustrates this very well, kind of about how would a Tao respond to life events. So this story is called The Farmer Whose Horse Ran Away. So the idea is that we're kind of breaking into the middle. There was a farmer, he's our Taoist in this story, had a beautiful, valuable horse that ran away from the farm. And the neighbor hears about it, and he wants to come over and express his condolences. So on hearing of the misfortune, the loss of the horse, the farmer's neighbor arrived to commiserate. But all he got from the farmer was, who knows what's good or bad. So the idea is the neighbor goes, oh, I can't believe your beautiful horse ran away. It was so awesome. You must be devastated. And the farmer's like, who knows what's good or bad. This proved to be true, for the next day the horse returned bringing with it a drove of wild horses in its train. This time the neighbor arrived with congratulations. They go, oh, you lost a horse and now the horse is back with more horses. What a stroke of luck. But he only received the same response. Who knows what's good or bad? This too was so, for the next day the farmer's son tried to mount one of the wild horses and broke a leg. More commiserations from the neighbor. Oh man, your poor son. With the same response, which was again validated. For soldiers soon came around commandeering for the army, and his son was spared because he had broken his leg. So the farmer stays in the middle. He doesn't respond to the extremes of despair or excitement because life can change on a dime. The wheel is always turning. All right, let's look at Confucius for a bit. Confucius too, again, at best we can say a kind of quasi-historical persona. I mean, we have these dates for him. He probably was a real person, but he's kind of been filtered through kind of myth and legend so much it's almost impossible to talk about him as a historical persona. And like Lao Tzu, born into a time of conflict, this era in Chinese history called the era of the Warring States. Several mini kingdoms within the landmass of China trying to conquer each other. So how do you live in such chaotic times? The tradition says that he was born into a noble family, son of a man named Xu Yonghe, who was a fierce warrior who led a successful but a life that was drenched in blood. And he becomes governor of the province of Tzu. So it very much reminds me of kind of the story of the Mahavir, of Buddha. Confucius is born into privilege, earthly privilege. His father is powerful, he's wealthy, he has land, he has armies. And as we'll see, Confucius chooses a different way. So Xu Yonghe, the story goes, has 9 daughters and 1 crippled son, but he longs for a healthy son to pass the kingdom on. At age 70, he's running out of time, he takes a 16-year-old girl as his concubine, and she has this dream of the Black Emperor coming to her and foretelling a wondrous event in this child, a wonderful prophecy about this child that's about to be born. And she gives birth to her son, Kung Fu Tzu, whose name has been Latinized, Romanized to Confucius, as we tend to refer to him in the Western world. So the story goes is that Confucius is such an ugly child. In fact, the tradition about it, he grows up into a very ugly adult that neither father or mother want him, and he's abandoned and left to die on the hillside. Kind of reminds me of the story of Oedipus in the Greek tradition. But of course, nature comes to the rescue, and he's cared for in a cave by an eagle and a tiger. There's lots of stories like these around the world. There's the stories of Romulus and Remus in the ancient Roman tradition. These boys who are set adrift in the river, and they are raised by the she-wolf. This is kind of a common archetypal kind of story you find around the world. So he's raised in a cave and ultimately makes his way back into human society, and grows up as this an ugly baby turns into an ugly adult. And this too seems to be an archetype you find in places. Socrates, who is much more of a kind of historically grounded figure than Confucius is, this figure of great wisdom in the Western tradition, also was famously ugly and almost had a comic persona based on how unflattering his looks were. And Confucius too, not much to look at, but the well of his wisdom went very, very deep. So Confucius' story goes is that he didn't follow his father into battle. He wants to pursue a path of wisdom and not violence. And he was revolted by the violence and the war that he saw around him. And he develops this philosophy of human betterment through education and proper relationships. And so here's one of the maybe not so subtle differences between Confucianism and Daoism. Whereas the Tao would say, leave the city, go to the mountains, find nature. Confucius says, no, these human constructs are useful. If we get education right, if we get the government right, if we get relationships in the family right, then everything else will follow. And so kind of Confucianism is a kind of Buddhism for the city, and Taoism is a kind of Buddhism for the wild. Maybe. Use that as much as it's useful. So he starts a school, but people don't want to hear his ideas. And in fact, the story goes is that he dies without really, in his eyes, accomplishing anything. His school never took off. His ideas never took root while Confucius was alive. But it's his successor, certain Mencius, who collects his wisdom. Like Confucius, like Lao Tzu, like Socrates, even like Jesus. These are all wise figures who never wrote anything down themselves, as far as we know. It takes their followers to collect the wisdom to write them down into these sacred texts. And that's what Mencius does. He collects the wisdom of his master. And over time, really over centuries, Confucianism, these teachings, these ideas, take deep root in culture and society to this very day. So what did Confucius believe? Kind of his key idea was that family is the key. Whereas the Taoists would say the individual is the key, find your peace in nature, everything else follows from that. Confucius says that the construct of the family is key. So yes, you are an individual, but you belong to a family. Get that right. If you get the family right, then the neighborhood is right. And then the larger society is right. It's the city, nation, world, universe. So it's a similar kind of thing in Taoism. You're kind of modeling yourself. The hope is if you get one structure right, it will reflect and ripple out and affect larger segments of society and will lead to kind of more harmony and balance throughout your culture. The basis of the relationship between children and their parents is filial piety. Children must demonstrate devotion and dedication to their parents in thought and deed. So obedience to father, obedience to mother, a culture of deep respect of the power of that relationship. And I think that's something you definitely see in kind of larger Asian culture to this day, kind of the importance of family and the importance of the one generation obeying and respecting and taking care of the other. Proper conventions and proper rituals, which Confucius called lead to harmony within the family, which leads to harmony in society, etc. And so again, like Daoism, you're trying to, by affecting one, you affect the rest. And again, education, schools, get that proper training right, and then society will produce worthy and moral leaders. In many ways, it's a much more kind of a overlap with kind of a Western idea than I say Daoism is a much more kind of a mystical approach. So the 5 key relationships in Confucianism: the ruler versus the ruled, husband and wife, parent-child, older brother and sister over younger brother and sister. And even within friendships, Confucius recognized that friendships aren't equal. You might say they are, or pretend they are. There's always going to be kind of a power balance. And the key is not to get rid of these power balances, but to recognize a clear hierarchy. There are superiors. Again, lots of this I think chafes against kind of Western ideas of equality and our Western talk of equity. But Confucius would say that these relationships, while I think in the Western world we hear the word superior and subordinate, we hear, this is where all the power is, and these are the powerless. This is oppressor, these are the oppressed. And that's not what's meant here. Confucius saw kind of a mutual kind of responsibility and harmony and balance within these. And so, yes, the subordinate person was always to defer to the superior, but the superior then had in turn an obligation to take care of, protect, cherish the subordinate. And so there's a reciprocal kind of balance here. So it's not about exercising power for power's sake. It's using power to bring about balance and harmony. 5 key virtues. So again, it's kind of an organized philosophy. It reminds me of kind of the key virtues of say, Jainism. There's Li, propriety, of acting in the right way in whatever situation that you're in. Ren, human-heartedness, benevolence, take care of others, be generous, use your powers, use your wealth for good, to bring a structure to society. Song, doing one's best. Always, accept what gifts that you have, accept which gifts you don't have, do your best within those. Shu, watch out for others, particularly those within your own family, within your own school. Be aware of kind of your position. Are you the ruler in this position? Are you the ruled in this position? And act accordingly. Yi, honesty and righteousness. Tell the truth. Do not bear false witness. Honesty is key to relationships. Honesty is key to balance throughout. The closest thing we get to a sacred text in Confucianism is what we call the Analects. 20 books centered around kind of these pithy Confucian phrases that I think they've made their way to the Western world, often in kind of these bastardized forms. But I mean, they reflect a kind of truth. Confucian wisdom is short, pithy, that cuts through a lot of the red tape in just a few words or a couple of lines. And in these aphorisms, you get this, a Confucian ideology about proper governance, proper relationships in society. So it's hard to say how many of these sayings did Confucius say himself. Confucianism develops over hundreds of years. His disciples, over the years, gather these sayings, compile them into these books over centuries. And so it kind of takes on a life of its own. And we'll never know, how much of this we can root in the persona of Confucius himself. But we have what we have. And the Analects and the wisdom within them is the foundation of what we call Confucianism today. So yes, some other kind of pithy phrases associated or attributed to Confucius. Real knowledge is to know the extent of one's ignorance. It's kind of this, be honest. Don't talk about things that you don't know about. And that's where true wisdom lies. Again, it's kind of paradoxical statements. It's very much like Socrates. The only true wisdom is in knowing that you know nothing. It's the people that pretend to wisdom that are the problem. And so, be humble, be honest, and be open about what you don't know. Life is really simple, but we insist on making it complicated. There you see that very kind of Buddhist idea of simplicity. Reject what's not needed. Don't strive after reputation. Don't strive after wealth. Simplicity is where you find balance. That's a common core thing I think you'll find in most, if not all, Eastern religions. The man who moves a mountain begins by carrying away small stones. It's just another way of kind of a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Focus on the small and keep your focus there, and over time it will build into something bigger. In fact, that's kind of the story of Confucianism. It began with a collection of sayings, and over centuries it builds into this body of literature, this body of the Analects. So even the sacred book of Confucius is an example of Confucian wisdom. It's just small pieces over time create something very large and important. I hear and I remember. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. So kind of a call to practical action. Build, make, construct. I think in a way that you tend not to see in Daoism. Teaching without thinking is useless, but thinking without education is more dangerous. So this primary focus on schools and the structure of schools, and the education should take on a distinctive form. Whereas the Taoists say you can go out into nature and find these things in a more mystical fashion, Confucius says, no, if we get the schools right and we have the right teachers, this is the best way to bring harmony to society. The man who asks a question is a fool for a minute. The man who doesn't ask is a fool for life. Risk embarrassment. Raise your hand. Ask a question. Even if people might laugh at you in the moment, that Confucius says that displays someone who has courage and who has wisdom. The person who doesn't say, "Well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be foolish," that's the person who is not facing his demons, is not facing difficulty, and is the true fool. The man who chases two rabbits catches neither. I just put that one here just because I like it, and I think it's true. All right, just to wrap up here. So Confucianism versus Taoism. So both philosophies, religions are certainly concerned with harmony and balance, but they still differ in significant ways. Certainly Confucianism is much more earthly. It says that human constructs have a place, have value. Taoism says, no, much more suspicious of that kind of thing. Go out into nature and pursue a much more otherworldly path. Confucianism, humans can be good, can pursue harmonious social order and structures. Taoism says, maybe, but find inner harmony first. And once you find that, everything else will fall into place. You can't build it. You can't construct it from a kind of a human point of view. Confucianism, lessons are relational, passed from teacher to student. Again, superior, subordinate. This is how wisdom is passed down. Daoism, lessons come from the writings of Lao Tzu, but ultimately one finds his own way. So Lao Tzu is that you don't slavishly follow the teacher, but they produce riddles. They produce meditation guides to help you find your own Tao, your own path. So we might see Confucianism certainly related to Taoism, and in fact, to what degree that the ancient Chinese people or even the modern Chinese people see these as distinct, I don't really know. But you might say Confucianism as a kind of a practical Taoism. It takes these kind of core ideas and say, well, okay, what if we applied that to building a school, organizing a government, running a household? Take Taoist ideas, but kind of give a kind of a practical structure to them. I think it's not a bad way to think about it. But again, both at the end of the day are interested in finding peace, finding harmony, finding balance that will filter out and hold and nurture the entire world. All right, that's all I got. See you next time.